Social relations. A person cannot make another happy, but he can make him unhappy. This is the main reason why there is more unhappiness than happiness in the world. The truth shall set us free, said Jesus. But it is lies that unite us. Mysticism joins and unites. Reason divides and separates. People crave belonging more than understanding, hence the prominent role of mysticism and the limited role of reason in human affairs. The two principal monomanias of modern man, monotheism and monogamy. Two wrongs don't make a right, but they make a good excuse. When a person can no longer laugh at himself, it is time for others to laugh at him. The adage, crime does not pay, is false. If it were true, there would be no crime. If you have strongly held opinions, you are opinionated. If you don't, you lack conviction. Either way, there is something wrong with you. Impertinence, the name authorities give to the aspirations for and declarations of independence of their inferiors. In Karl Marx's and Sigmund Freud's vision, man is victim of oppression or repression. In Adam Smith's and Ludwig von Mises's vision, man is a victor over instinct and impulse. The former vision supports the collectivist totalitarian dream of liberating man from the slavery of brutal capitalists and harsh superegos. The latter supports the individualist libertarian dream of man controlling his own impulses and peacefully cooperating with like-minded others. Equality in human relations is like the ideal gas in physics. The most we can expect in real life is mutually satisfying reciprocity, which ironically is hindered rather than hastened by strivings for equality. It is fashionable nowadays to assert, in the manner of Kant, that if one person uses another, the true humanity of both is violated, and hence that, in a morally proper relationship, a person should not use another. This is idealistic humbug. People always use each other. Human relationships are good or bad, moral or immoral, depending not on whether people use each other, but on how they do so. The natural state of mankind is poverty. Wealth is something man must create. Similarly, the natural state of mankind is mental illness, in the sense of being undisciplined, useless, and infantile. Mental health, in the sense of being competent, self-responsible, and caring for one's family, is something man must create. It is therefore wrong to think of poverty or mental illness as being caused, but it is right to think of wealth and mental health in that way. This is why poverty and mental illness must be overcome by the personal effort of the affected individual. While a person may lose his wealth and mental health without his participation or even against his will. Moreover, just as no amount of religion and prayer can transform an undisciplined and uneducated peasant into an effective farmer producing a surplus of food, so no amount of psychiatry and antipsychotic drugs can transform an undisciplined and uneducated youth into an effective person producing marketable goods or services. In close personal relationships, people often either envy or pity one another. Power and powerlessness both corrupt. The more widely power is diffused among people, the more dignified will be the relationship among them. Paternalism is a mortal enemy of dignity. How can a person feel dignified vis-a-vis a medical profession, a judiciary, a government that never says to him, "I don't know, it's none of my business, it's your problem, you deal with it"? It is misleading to speak of phenomena such as slavery or involuntary mental hospitalization as social problems, since they are, in fact, arrangements representing solutions that people have evolved and adopted to solve certain other problems, for example, the need for cheap human labor or for controlling certain troublesome members of society. Calling such solutions problems implies that people are eager and willing to eschew the benefits they derive from them, which is usually not true. Once it becomes true, the arrangement ceases to be an acceptable solution and is quickly abandoned. Such was the case, for example, with the practice of confining Japanese Americans in so-called relocation camps, which stopped as soon as World War II ended. The fact that coercive psychiatric practices have become a chronic social problem thus suggests that it is not a problem that people are trying to solve, but rather a manifestation of our intense ambivalence about insane behavior and psychiatric coercion. Great jurists are made by sacrificing plaintiffs to the Constitution, great physicians by sacrificing patients to research. The moral: if you value your freedom and health, Don't be a test case in the court or the clinic. What is a friend? For some, a sycophant. For others, an incorruptible but loving critic. Beware of feeling sorry for someone who can harm you. It is a luxury only the very powerful or very masochistic can afford. If you feel sorry for yourself, someone will soon give you something to be sorry about. Articulate persons argue, inarticulate persons quarrel. Beware of the person who treats you as if he had no obligations to you. Like a rapist, he will reduce you to an object of his desires to satisfy his lust for self-gratification. Beware of the person who treats you as if you had no obligations to him. Like a therapist, he will reduce you to an object of his duties to satisfy his lust for self-esteem. Beware of the person who never says, I'm sorry. He is weak and frightened, and will sometimes at the slightest provocation fight with the desperate ferocity of a cornered animal. Suti, also sati. 1. The Indian Hindu custom of a wife placing herself, or being forced to place herself, on her dead husband's funeral pyre. 2. A sacred ritual, suicide, or murder, depending on circumstances and the observer's viewpoint. 3. Autopyromania, a fatal mental illness not yet recognized by the science of psychiatry that knows no national boundaries. How men hate waiting for a few hours while their wives shop for clothes and trinkets. How women hate waiting, often for much of their lives, while their husbands shop for fame and glory. Insofar as motherhood is an occupation, it is reasonable to ask the same questions about it that one might ask about any other, namely, how many members of this particular occupational class does society need? How many is it able or willing to support? We appear unable or willing to accept the reality of human conflict. It is never simply man who offends against his fellow man. Someone or something, the devil, mental illness intervenes to obscure, excuse, and explain away man's terrifying inhumanity to man. There are two kinds of leadership, for dependence and independence. Historically, the only readily recognizable kind has been leadership for dependence. When successful, it results in the recruitment of faithful followers who, through their claims and conduct, confirm the glory and validate the wisdom of the great leader. In contrast, leadership for independence is of low visibility and hence difficult to recognize. When successful, it results in independent individuals who, through their claims and conduct, confirm only their own authenticity. Being the master in a system is not the same as being the master of it. Indeed, to be dominant in an autocratic system is to be dominated by it as well. The slave is ruled by the iron fist, the master by the hand in the velvet glove. People can stand each other only for a limited period, hence they protect themselves either by ceremonial distancing or by physical escape. Insular societies with limited space, such as Japan, exemplify the former. Continental societies with seemingly unlimited space, such as the United States, the latter. In Japan, social conflict is managed as a rule by ceremonial separation. Wife is kept at a distance from husband, worker from manager, and generally subordinate from superior, not by physical distance, but by social distancing. This requires establishing discrete existential spaces for the contestants. In the United States, social conflict is managed, as a rule, by physical separation. The Indian is exiled to the reservation, the young man goes west, husband and wife divorce, the mentally ill are segregated. This requires establishing discrete geographical spaces for the contestants. In science, it's dangerous to lie. If discovered, the liar is cast out of the group as a faker and fraud. In religion, politics, and psychiatry, it's dangerous to tell the truth. If discovered, the truth-teller is cast out of the group as a heretic and a traitor. Our biological existence begins in the womb, and our social existence in society, and more narrowly, in the family. Over these beginnings we, ourselves, have no control whatever. Our complete passivity, our inability to have or exercise our intention or will, does not last long, however. Soon, we are expected to eat and sleep only at certain times. Next, we are expected to control the functioning of our bladder and bowel, and then all of our musculature. As social beings, we thus begin our lives with responsibilities. Childhood is a period of tutelage during which, as a rule, we are given many responsibilities, but acquire or have few rights. This important disjunction between responsibilities and rights is repeated most glaringly in the institution of slavery, and, less obviously, but just as importantly, in the relations between superiors and inferiors in religion, medicine, and the countless paternalistic arrangements through which human beings seek to reinstitute the original parent-child relationship. The error in attributing human behavior to drives, instincts, mental brain diseases, or other impersonal, non-willed elements is that all human behavior is learned, by which I mean simply that although what we do may be biologically driven, when, where, and how we do it is learned. Eating, drinking, urinating, and so forth are biologically driven, but we learn when, where, and how to eat, drink, urinate, and so forth. Accordingly, we could view nearly everything we do as learning, performing, or teaching how to do X, where X may stand for playing chess or tennis, speaking or writing, helping or harming, obeying the law or breaking it, and so forth. In short, where X may stand for how to live, as we ourselves expect and want to live, or as others expect and want us to live, or some combination of both. All modem ideologies view certain classes of persons, or even all persons, as victims suffering from oppression and promise them liberation. For example, in communism, the oppressed are the workers, the oppressors the capitalists. In feminism, they are the women and the men. And in psychiatry, psychoanalysis, the oppressed are all of mankind, enslaved by their mental illness or unconscious. Accordingly, the adherents of these belief systems seek salvation in liberation from their oppressors. But what happens when they achieve liberation, either by their own efforts or, as has happened more often in the 20th century, because their oppressors withdraw from the scene? What typically happens is that the formerly oppressed claim non-responsibility for their inability to care or provide for themselves and demand that others, their own state or other states, take care of them. At home, we see women, granted equal rights with men, rejecting responsibility for the consequences of their behavior and demanding that others, the taxpayer, pay for their abortions or for caring for their children. Similarly, we see mental patients, occasionally granted their liberty, clamoring that others, the taxpayers, pay for their shelter or for a therapy fully under their own control. Abroad, we see formerly colonial people, granted political independence, rejecting responsibility for the consequences of their behavior and demanding that others, especially Americans, feed their growing populations. Paradoxically, in each of these cases, we strongly approve of recognizing such people's right to liberty, but equally strongly disapprove of treating them as fully responsible for their actions and for the consequences of their actions. The doctrinal beliefs of biological psychiatry and feminism are the two favorite shibboleths of late 20th century America. According to the first, mental illnesses are biological abnormalities that justify psychiatric coercions. According to the second, there are no biological differences between men and women significant enough to justify legal, political, or social distinctions between the sexes. The former affirms a biological basis for problems in living. The latter denies a biological basis for existential differences between men and women. Each of these falsehoods is now acclaimed as official truth. The person who rejects the prevailing psychiatric orthodoxy is denying the reality of mental illness, whereas the person who rejects the prevailing feminist orthodoxy is advocating sex discrimination. Persons whose lives are dull and insignificant look for significance in the past or the future. This is why a glorified, mythologized religious, racial, or national past is so important for some people, and why the glorious utopian future of one's children, party, nation, or even all of mankind, foreordained by salvation religion or politics, is so important for others. Life is a joke God plays on us. Some take the joke too seriously. They are likely to become fanatics or madmen. Others don't take it seriously enough. They are likely to become humorists or libertarians. Most people, of course, take it just the right way. They are likely to become normal persons.